And if you could be, I can request you to kindly stand up for the two national anthems to be played. Thank you. And now for the national anthem of Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum again. It is indeed an honor and privilege to welcome the board and advisory board to the first meeting of the Forum of Dialogue and Diplomacy. Tonight, inshallah, is the first of many events planned to foster stronger and better relations between Pakistan and the United States. Before we start, I would like to thank the sponsors for tonight's event, Nawab Saifuddin Laghari and Mr. Tahir Bhatti, along with another donor who chooses to stay anonymous. Thank you so much. We are honored to have Ambassador Sada Cumber as a guest speaker. Ambassador Sada Cumber is a foreign policy and national security expert and serves as a senior advisor to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He also serves on the advisory board of the National Security Institute in Washington. He's a frequent speaker and writer on national security matters, global economic paradigms, and involvement in civic engagement. Over the past 30 years, Ambassador Cumber has founded over a dozen enterprises and successfully negotiated several exit transactions. He has broad experience in the areas of board oversight, senior management, business development, strategic marketing, international business mergers and acquisitions, and IP development and licensing. Appointed by the White House in 2008, he served as the first US Special Envoy to the OIC with the mandate of improving dialogue between the US and the Muslim world. In this capacity, he has traveled to over 42 Muslim countries. Ambassador Cumber is married to Mumtaz, and they have 2 children and 4 grandkids. Before I ask Ambassador Sada Cumber to present his lecture, I would like to welcome his daughter, Rabia Samji. Rabia, thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Sada Cumber.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, गुड इवनिंग। हमारे दोस्त जो हैं सिराज नारसी, he has been a family friend for many years. He went to college in Austin, Texas, and knows my daughter Rabia when she was a child. So I just overheard them talking, and Siraj asked Rabia, "What brings you here?" And she says, "I'm here to critique my dad." So I think I have to speak in measured tones and proper vocabulary so I can score well in her critique. I'm also honored to be invited to be the very first deliver the very first lecture at the Forum for Diplomacy and Dialogue. This is a lecture series that is going to be beginning from today, and hopefully, inshallah, we will be observing and listening and hearing to many other speakers who would come and talk about the Pakistan-USA relationship. My thanks to the Executive Board for this special invitation, and I see among this group scholars and influencers, many I can really call them friends. Ladies and gentlemen, the content of my lecture is not only candid, but what I call a mile wide and an inch deep. It's probably being presented from the forest level, and after my remarks, hopefully we will have an opportunity to discuss matters at the tree level. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pakistan-USA relationship is not about shared interests. It's about deliverables that both countries want from each other, period, stop. This is it. Both parties have certain deliverables that they have to deliver. It is an uneasy trade-off in which each country does what the other wants in return for getting the things it wants. That's the divergent interest in my topic. The other uses of word divergent are conflicting and or different. Pakistan and USA affiliation has never been of friendship or genuine partnership. Each nation tries to get as much of what matters to it while doing as minimum as possible in return. That's the crafty partners. Other uses of the word crafty is shrewd and or sneaky. I want to begin with two quotes which encapsulate the core of how each country stands to benefit from the other. My friend Rick Perry, former governor, presidential candidate, and the US Energy Secretary, invited me to visit him in Washington at the Department of Energy building. In that building are the words, "Nations don't have friends. Nations only have interests." Ladies and gentlemen, from the US perspective, that is the Pakistan-US relationship in the above 8 words that I just uttered. Now, before partition in 1947, Lord Mountbatten, the last viceroy of British India, made it clear that he expected India to become a respectable nation. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, he said, "We are putting up a tent." He also used the word Nessun hut. Nessun hut is something to do with a shed which is prefabricated of some metal. So in both ways, as a hut, or he said, as a tent. Now remember these 12 words also while we are talking about this relationship. Pakistan's reaction to his statement has helped define its trajectory since its independence. It is hard to find another relationship between alleged alias as dysfunctional as Pakistan and America. Yet, because we have need for each other, it endures. So, ladies and gentlemen, settle in for a bumpy ride of Pakistan-USA cooperation. The US recognized Pakistan 2 months after the partition, one of the first nations to do so. Almost from the beginning, it was clear this alliance would not be of any comprehensive. Instead, this cooperation would be limited to specific things. America largely defined this limited relationship through its lack of response to the 1964 Indo-Pakistan War and the 1978 fall of Dhaka. US need was limited to Pakistan's support in Cold War. The US did not want Soviet military alliances through Warsaw Pact to spread beyond Europe. Conversely, America hoped to encircle the Soviet Union with its own alliances. Pakistan became a linchpin of these efforts, participating both in CENTO and CETO. America also wanted Pakistan as a counterweight to India. While officially neutral, Delhi then clearly preferred Moscow over Washington. The US helped Pakistan keep India constantly rattled over Kashmir issue. In fact, the CIA actually helped develop ISI to exert covert pressure on India in Kashmir. Given America's complaints about ISI today, I wonder how many policymakers in Washington regretted that. While America has no regret about the limited relationship when it serves US interests, it is not always happy when Islamabad does the same thing to US. On the other hand, Pakistan has pursued its own self-interest also. Pakistan never forgot Lord Mountbatten's description of Pakistan as a tent. At the time, I think because Pakistan feared it might be true, everyone's question was, what can Pakistan do to ensure it is not a tent ready to be blown away with the first strong wind? A twist of partition gave one answer at least. Compared to its small geography, Pakistan got 33% of British India's military and did even better with key assets like well-trained and highly disciplined officer corps, armor, and even aircrafts. While Pakistan had fewer economic assets, militarily it punched above its weight. Leaning into that pre-existing military strength seemed like a pragmatic choice at that time, but it gave Pakistan's military an edge over its civilian leadership. Early on, the military's significant role was encoded in Pakistan's DNA. Equally early on, Pakistan could not achieve political stability. Efforts were hijacked by large landowners and other privileged groups that placed self-interest over national interest and continues to do so even today. Political instability created frequent opportunities for military intervention, reinforcing its appearance of indispensability. Cooperation with America allowed Pakistan to expand its military strength, but this was purely transactional decision. This approach continues even today, whether it's security cooperation with US or UN peacekeeping. Pakistan always looks for ways to maintain military units, acquire training, and field experience, of course, on somebody else's purse. For Pakistan military, large defense budgets and entitlements require that India be perceived as a constant existential threat. Since its independence, the United States of America has provided Pakistan with over $78 billion in aid. While most aid has been military, it includes considerable economic aid and humanitarian assistance too. True that $78 billion is just little over half of $150 billion that have been given to Israel, but it is more than twice that $35 billion received by South Korea. Israel used that money to build itself today into a regional superpower to a degree where the Trump administration largely outsourced Middle East foreign policy leadership to Israel. South Korea, on the other hand, which once envied Pakistan's progress and growth, emerged as one of the world's top economies. And for Pakistan, regardless of how the aid was earmarked, very little literally trickled down for a common citizen. America looks to Pakistan to advance its security interests. And the relationship has soared and plunged as those interests change. During the Cold War, Pakistan was America's bulwark against Soviet Union in the South and Central Asia. That put Pakistan in a good place. After 2001, America became convinced that Islamic terrorism and Islamic rogue states were its main threats. That left Pakistan, understandably, in a very awkward position. Having printed on its passport Islamic Republic of Pakistan, this also created issues. This also gave away Pakistan's detractors, on the other hand, to strongly pursue foreign policy of pushing Pakistan into isolation. Then Washington anxieties shifted to China. Arguably, this is a crisis of America's own making. For 30 years, America's political parties have focused on scoring points against each other by moving one party to extreme right and another pulling extreme left. Both Republicans and Democrats push their ideologies rather than cooperating to advance citizen-focused interests. This left a huge hole in the middle where special interest groups and lobbyists pour billions of dollars to buy influence in Congress. It also allowed China a free hand for 30 years. We see today what China was able to achieve in those 30 years, while American political beliefs got polarized. While Islamabad spent years building with ties with China, it was unprepared for America's eventual pivot trying to constrain China's growth. There, the ground shifted under its feet and Pakistan got blindsided. Ladies and gentlemen, condensing 75 years of Pakistan-US affairs into a single equation, the USA uses Pakistan as an extension of its security interests in the region, and Pakistan uses America for funds and military equipment to keep itself strong against India. That's the bottom line. America accuses Pakistan of playing a double game. But that's true for both sides. In actuality, Pakistan has played this game better than America, and better than most nations in transactional relationship with Washington. Pakistan is not like Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, where the ruling family needs to be loyal I'm underlining the word loyal, where the ruling families needs to be loyal to America to protect itself from its own people. America doesn't have that kind of leverage over Islamabad, and Pakistan does not have to be so-called loyal to America. A case could be made here that the US needs Pakistan more than vice versa. Now that we have examined the bilateral relationship, let's consider where each country is today and how it got there. Let's start with Pakistan first. Since the inception of Pakistan in 1947, first the military, then the large landowners, land mafias, and industrialists have dominated 3/4 of Pakistan's economy. Their singular goal has been to maximize their wealth while minimizing their obligations, including avoiding paying any taxes. With no sense of duty to less fortunate citizens or enlightened self-interest to uplift the nation as a whole. When Ayub Khan launched large infrastructure developments projects like New Karachi and others, he was prevented. With the projects left half completed, the land mafias came and took over all of those lands. Still, their power remained tenuous until Bhutto arrived on the scene wanting his own political power base, offered and said, if you support PPP, I will legitimize you, I will protect you and your assets. And that's what happened, ladies and gentlemen. Today in Sindh, the party is run by these landlord mafias and vaderas. Big industry in Pakistan is also protected, by the way. They have their own political patrons and are politicians themselves. They are protected through sugar mills and other subsidies. Look at all the politicians in Punjab today, what they represent. The landlords are protected, the military is protected, the land mafias are protected, major industries are protected. That leaves just 1/4 of the economy for everyone else. And these people are tired and disillusioned because with the major players protected, a small group of actors left shouldering the burden of taxes keeping the country afloat, which is very, very challenging. And now for America. In US, we make many claims of American exceptionalism. Couple of areas I want to cover. Private sector wealth creation is one of where it actually is true. Since World War II, America's private sector has been the most formidable engine of wealth creation in the history of mankind. But if you see America's wealth creation, it rests on the foundations of its own rule of law, higher education, meritocracy, business climate, and infrastructure investments. Unfortunately, those foundations are now squeezed by politicians from extreme left and right. Result-focused citizen dialogue is being supplanted by ideological dogma threatening the scaffolding of American huge success. In the 80s, ladies and gentlemen, Republican President Ronald Reagan would have lunch every Friday with Democratic Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill to discuss citizen-focused issues. Both parties have peppered over these weaknesses by using military to prop up the economy. Most of the $2 trillion that the USA put in Afghanistan for 20 years came back to America through the purchase of military hardware, pharmaceutical, and infrastructure, a backdoor subsidy. We have come far from use of soft power diplomacy. And I remember when I was a child, I was about 8 years old, and my sister was a medical doctor working for a community clinic. One day I was sick, and I asked her, and she said, "Why don't you come with me and you sit in the clinic and watch?" she put me on the side on a chair and said, "Look how I work here." And I would see these ladies coming with the newborn babies, and my sister and a nurse will weigh them, check them. Yeah, kind of I've seen them scolding their mothers how to train and tell them how to take care of the kids. But when these ladies are leaving, I would see the nurse going and pulling out milk powder, wheat, and other things from these bags, which had these two hands holding each other, and it says US aid. And I didn't know at that time what was US aid. So I asked my sister, I said, "What is this? Who's giving us all this?" He says, "There's a country called America that gives us all of this to help our people." And I said, "Wow." Then I grew up and I realized that that was the soft power of America that they used to do to get things done. Now that we have lost it, I think Rabia's generation or Afshan's generation doesn't even know the word soft power used in American diplomacy. It's gone that far off. The US is out of Afghanistan, of course, but that shell game continues. There are reasons why America military support for Ukraine makes some sense for American foreign policy, but there is no doubt it's also been good for the US balance sheet. Another genuinely exceptional aspect of America is dollar itself. Never before has a currency come so close to being a universal means of exchange. That means almost no part of the global economy is beyond America's reach, and its sanctions can be genuinely effective foreign policy tool. But it also means Washington is always tempted to weaponize dollar rather than exploring other options. With each application, sanctions lose effectiveness by giving other countries incentive to diversify the global financial system. Another areas, large-scale immigration, higher education, and few other foundational anchors have played a vital role in where America is today. Ladies and gentlemen, when the Mughal king Shah Jahan was building Taj Mahal here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the same times, Americans were building Harvard University. We in America have trained more PhDs and master's degrees who are presently leading every sector of growth in any part of the world, including running of those countries. America has liberally produced so many of these talented people around the world. I want to finish by dialing back to the bilateral relationship. Despite the problems I have highlighted, the US and Pakistan will continue to need each other. In the interest of time, I want to limit myself to one example. When America went into Afghanistan in 2001, most of the world said the Taliban are gone forever. Pakistan knew better, that one day US troops will withdraw. For 20 years, Pakistan was smart enough and kept talking to the Taliban. For Islamabad, the hope was that America would value Pakistan as the backdoor channel for what former US ambassador to Pakistan and Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker, said, Trump's surrender talks. Instead, America went with Qatar. Leaving Pakistan is thinking, really? Qatar? It was a missed opportunity for Pakistan, as Pakistan would have delivered America, I believe, a better deal than what Qatar was able to do or Zalmi Khalilzad was able to do. As the drone strike killing Ayman al-Zawahiri shows, US isn't done with that region. Even in Washington, doesn't realize yet Pakistan is America's best bet for interacting with Taliban even today. Ladies and gentlemen, nations don't have friends. nations have interests, summarizes Pakistan-US relationship. If Pakistan and USA were friends, they would have fallen out. If they were married, they would have been divorced. But it is an alliance of crafty partners and divergent interests. We keep needing things from each other, so we put up with each other. Pakistan and America don't have to like each other. I never see us having the kind of relationship like America and Israel, where, in the words of Congressman David Price, when Israeli lobby AIPAC says jump, we say how high in the US Congress. But for US and Pakistan, each country would benefit from better respecting each other's capabilities. Of course, there is an elephant in the room. We in America are witnessing a potential Talibanization of America. Trump may be a con man with no real ideology of his own. But many of his backers are Christian fundamentalists and white supremacists pushing America towards theocracy. I, however, strongly believe that the magnificence of America is that our democracy is an ongoing experiment. In the last 200 years, many episodes have nearly derailed America's democracy. While we have seen fascism and other forms of radical government coming and going for the last 200 years in Europe and the rest of the world, America has always remained a strong democracy. It has a way of self-correcting itself. So I see a strong America for many years to come, in a robust America aggressively competing with a stout China. Now, I think it's a good time for the leadership of a forum for dialogue and diplomacy to put its best foot forward in discussing where the relationship of Pakistan and USA should go from here. Thank you very much.
You can have this. I have them.
Am I supposed to be here?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, please. Do you want me to take the class?
No, I'll hold it.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Banyan Khan, and thank you so much, Ambassador Cumber. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to be facilitating the Q&A, and we're going to limit it to 15 minutes because that's when Maghrib is. So please make sure that your questions are relevant to the topic, right? And they're specific and concise. So I'm going to walk around and just take your questions. So first up. Please introduce.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zafar Tahir, and it's an honor to listen to Ambassador Sada Cumber. I think this forum could not have selected a better speaker because of his network, because of his experiences, especially in diplomacy. Cumber Sahab, you started out by saying that this relationship is transactional. Pakistani Americans used to define themselves as coming from a country that is strategically located. Lebanese Americans, Persian Americans, Indian Americans said, no, we come from a country that has deep culture, large populations, right? But we always focused on strategic interest. And that's why it is deliverables. But one thing is changing this, by the way. And that is the presence of Pakistani Americans now in the mainstream. Maybe 500,000, but I think they're in the leadership of larger 6 to 7 million Muslims. That's where Indians cannot compete with us, because we are present in every mosque, every Islamic institution. So our shadow is much bigger than our height. How do we leverage that for the benefit of Pakistan? And I submit to you that Pakistani Americans should leverage their weight as the leader of the entire Muslim American community, and then prove to the American leadership that we are here to stay, we are here to participate, just like Dr. Suleiman Lalani will inshallah be in Austin and parcel of lawmaking here. This is where I think Pakistani Americans need to make a shift away from Pakistani politics and away from the strategic location of Pakistan or strategic importance of Pakistan. Rather than it should be, we're coming from a country that has huge human potential. It should be based on human achievements, culture. So I would like to comment on that.
Thank you very much. Zafar Saab, I think if you see the history of Pakistanis in America, I think as the first generation Muslims, Pakistanis coming here, every one of this person here present has done a very good job of assimilating himself or herself into this society. We have done a good job. The first generation always have issues because we are also concerned about the quality of life and the lifestyle that we want to give to ourselves and our children. There is also a guilt in all of us, which actually pushes us to be very, very competitive. We left our roots and we came here. So we always want to make sure that we want to make a statement that we are very successful. So which we work very, very hard. So I'm seeing that also as a positive. The best and the greatest opportunity we have today is our children, especially our grown-up children. Dr. Suleiman is one example of that. I would like us to encourage our children to go to city councils meetings, engage themselves, write op-eds, write opinions, get them published. And these kids are brilliant. All of us, even myself as a father, I have underestimated the talent that my children bring, and every one of us are guilty of that. The potential that you are suggesting is there. And it is a process where it is not by design, but it is by default. The reason I always tell Suleiman when he comes to see me is, Suleiman, win or lose is not the issue here. Your attempt to come out is an inspiration to the younger generation by default, if not by design. So I truly believe that give yourself or give ourselves one generation. These kids are going to be popping up. And these kids are very well in tune with what's happening. My role as a father and your role as a father and this fine young ladies as a mothers of children, our basic responsibility here to keep them aligned with the value of our faith and our family is to give them the best possible value system and the best possible education and let them thrive.
We're going to take our next question. Can you please introduce yourself?
Assalamualaikum, my name is Siraj Darsi. Sadawai, when your introduction was being done, I was thinking that, you know, in addition to your wife and 2 children and 4 grandchildren, I think it should also be mentioned that you have a number of godchildren and god family, people like me and countless others that you have mentored. And God knows what I and others would have done in Austin if you were not there to help us out at every, you know, problem that we face as undergraduate and grad students. My question is, this is probably the most candid analysis that I've heard of US-Pakistani relationship, particularly coming from a Pakistani. When I saw the topic divergent interest, I had a pretty good sense of what we were going to listen. But do you think that Pakistan overestimates its importance in this relationship and demands more than what it's worth, thinking of its strategic relationship? And secondly, with the past few months, do you think that there is a possibility that we can go back to a relationship that existed during Ayub time or during Musharraf time?
Thank you, Suraj. I, to a larger degree, looking at the wealth and the size of economy that America is, $25 trillion. I think $78 billion paid to Pakistan was not sufficient. And I'll give you an example. When Russia entered Afghanistan, ISI, with the help of US and Saudis, created a force pulling out kids from every madrasas and everywhere, all around the world. And Pakistanis were able to push back Russia at the cost of only $8 billion to America. And we are still paying for it, by the way. We haven't finished yet, because every time we have problems in Pakistan, it's because of what we did for America to push out Russia out of it. That was $8 billion cost to USA at that time. The next time USA wanted to go itself in Afghanistan, and what did it cost it? $2 trillion. 20 years, scores of people dying. If America was smart, it would have asked Pakistan to do it again, and Pakistan should have asked at least $1 trillion for it. So yes, the complaint that Pakistan has that we are not taking care of us and not paying our share, I am with Pakistan on it, because Pakistan has lost not only the value, Pakistan as a sovereign country has been damaged, and we are still paying for it. Now, it is an internal matter of what we do with those dollars that come to us. That's the topic that we need to talk later. But I agree with you that American economy being a $25 trillion, getting $78 billion, and where Pakistan is today because of that is a sorry figure.
We have another question from the back. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Muzaffar Qazalbash, actually a medical doctor, but it's very enlightening, and thank you very much for your excellent speech and for enlightening us. A couple of questions, a little contrarian. So one of them, like you and someone alluded to that, and that is something that has been said that since its inception, Pakistan did overestimate itself and posed to be a power in the region or bulwark against USSR when it was geographically not close to USSR, and probably of little military assistance to United States. So would like to hear your thoughts, and then a couple of other things. And again, this is probably my background in science and the randomness that we talk about events and the relationship. So many things that have happened between Pakistan and US relationship are not by design or someone had planned it. These were events which were not in any other's control. And whether it was US invasion of Afghanistan, which opened military assistance, and we can talk about and debate the repercussions of that, or 9/11, when Musharraf, who was a pariah, then became one of the closest friends of the United States, and that was another windfall for Pakistan. So these things no one really designed or planned, and they happened. And then the third thing is that, yes, there was assistance, but most of it is military assistance to the security state, not for the people of Pakistan, which was basically the biggest capital of Pakistan, the human capital. It did not go to build schools, colleges, healthcare system, universities. So sorry, too many things, but just wanted to give a contrarian view.
Thank you. Since 2012, Pakistan has received over $6 billion of aid, not earmarked to military. It was earmarked to exactly the social programs and upliftment of its citizens. Those $6 billion were given to Pakistan for that. When I was US Special Envoy, I visited Pakistan. And we had a budget, America had the budget of $6 million, 6 million, not billion, mixed $6 million that we were getting from the F-16s that we were buying. I went to Jordan, and I went to Poland, and I went to Pakistan. And I recommended that as a special US envoy, being a Muslim, I think those $6 million that we are getting, we should start technology incubators. Jordan immediately jumped on it and says, give us a program, bring us your venture capitalists. We are going to put those $6 billion and we're going to start pushing this. Poland was very happy to do it. When I reached Islamabad, the military there said, no, we need these because we want to build new homes for our journalists. The priorities are different. That's the challenge. The dollars always came, but the dollars were misused for whatever reasons. And I don't want to get into that because this is the team that it needs to talk about. I have another friend who was managing $72 million project in Sindh, schools. The agreement with the US government, and I was part of that agreement, was that after the $72 million of US are invested, they will leave and the Sindh government would go into their assemblies and pass the budget to sustain it for another 10 years. After $72 million that we spent, Americans, when we left, what happened to those buildings and schools? It went into the lead mafia. And they are now opening shopping centers probably there. The challenge is within us when it comes to spending of those dollars, or how we need to invest those dollars for the welfare of our own people. That's why I never talk about America or never blame America, because once you have given me that responsibility as a father, I need to make sure that my family is intact and the quality of life and lifestyle that I give them is proper in a way that they can excel themselves in life. We have failed there.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening lecture. Two quick questions, one from the past and one from very current. Sorry. This is good. So, Ambassador Saab, when we take a look at history, do you think in hindsight, if Pakistan had remained neutral by siding NAM like India and not being a part of CENTO and CETO, our trajectory would have been different? And number two, in the current international scenario, how big of a thorn is CPAC in Pakistan-American relationships? Thank you.
The first response to your question is exactly what I said. The Mountbatten statement about tent is still living in our core in Pakistan. And that would not go away. Pakistan needed right away aid to sustain itself. Now remember, India also started not very well. But in 60s, especially in 1962, India quickly decided that if they fall into this rut of going for IMF and aid, they will never be able to feed the volume of people that they have. India decided at that time to move away. Pakistan, because of instability and of the political institutions, we failed to do it because we were more interested in bringing those dollars to our own maximizer, like I said in my remarks. That's where I think we failed. The nationality, it was lacking then and it's lacking now. A former ambassador from Brazil was having breakfast with me one day. And he said, the challenge in Pakistan is that every morning, every politician wakes up and he has a little chisel and a little hammer. And all he does is keeps, making sure that Pakistan, whatever is doing, using his chisel and a hammer to benefit himself. So again, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm blaming ourselves. The second thing you asked is CPAC. Unfortunately, with what we have to offer in return, we do not have responsible government. I was sitting with the Saudi leadership in Washington when Mr. Zardari was president of Pakistan and had come to US. I was sitting at the Pakistan embassy, we were having dinner. The Saudi ambassador, Adil Al-Jubair, he said to me, he said, the challenge with Pakistan is that every few years you have a new prime minister who comes to us and says, we need more funds, or we need you to sell us oil at deferred payments. And we agree. And about 2.5 years later, a new prime minister comes and says, oh, that was that guy, remember? Now we don't have funds to pay you for the previous deal that we made. But can you give us more money or give us oil? And he said, this goes on and on. And how far can you take? And I think some awakening someday will come. There's a I think Faiz Ahmad Faiz saying, हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे. Let's wait and see who will be that leader who will really take us to the next level.
So I know we have a lot many questions, but because of time constraint, we're going to ask Mr. Ghazzafar Hashmi to say the closing remarks for this particular session. We will take a break for prayers, but before that, we're going to I'm going to hand this over to the draft.
Thank you, Dr. Sada. When I came here, it was revealed by Dr. Javed Lagari that I have to sum up the discussion. So he wanted me to be more attentive and listen to everyone so that I can sum up. Anyway, I have jotted down some points. So the nations have not friends. They don't have friends, they have interests. These Pakistan-USA relations have been hardly converged, and most of the time they were diverged. Both has to deliver, these were based on the deliverables, and both has to deliver something. Post-withdrawal scenario of USA forces from Afghanistan has again exposed the fragility of these relations. It is the story of alliances, pacts, treaties, and agreements. It is the history of mistrust, allegations, deception, good relations, bad relations, and weak relations. USA alleged dubious role played by Pakistan in war on terror. At this stage, some thinkers in Washington, they think that Washington needs to continue engaging Islamabad, but there are so many other thinkers, they are of the view that Washington should revisit its terms of engagement with Islamabad. Instead of seeing Pakistan-USA relations through the prism of Afghanistan and security-centric issues, USA should treat Pakistan as an equal ally and sovereign nation, and it should extend its relations to trade and cultural ties. Pakistan used America as an agency for receiving military and economic aid, and USA used Pakistan for the fulfillment of its interests in the region. Right from the beginning, these relations have been transactional, in which USA was guaranteed to have a security in the region. The decision of joining war on terror was the result of coercive diplomacy. So Pakistan decided to take money. Most of talks revolved around the aid, putting GHQ in the Quran. Even if the scope of these results is narrow, there is still a need to do much needed repair work. Broadening the lens of relationship outside the security-centric focus may help this. There is a need to mitigate the trust deficit. Pakistan is not a lost cause. USA needs to look beyond the war on terror. Pakistan's prestige as a sovereign nation has been damaged, and we need to rethink how it can be restored. What role Pakistani Americans play to influence US administration and decision makers to see Pakistan from different perspectives? Thank you.
Well, on behalf of all of us, we would like to thank Ambassador Sada Cumber for his very enlightening talk. And may I request our Secretary, Sada Wahid Sher, to present a token of appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really very enlightening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.